dive into the stories behind your why. I think I would love to hear some of those stories that pertains to your why. They maybe inspired you, maybe changed your trajectory, maybe help you help someone else. I think I love to hear those stories for you.
Okay, you want me to dive in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think of my business life as a pre and post. And what I mean by that is pre working for Steve Jobs and post. Because the work I did for Steve and our interactions really changed a lot the way I'm thinking about businesses and customers and products. Um, Before Steve, I was a kind of a younger, naive, in a way, entrepreneur. Made a lot of mistakes. I still made a lot of mistakes after Steve, by the way. That didn't go away. But I was one thing that I always was interested in business is people and meeting people and hearing their stories. As you may know, I was doing research in physics. It is a very lonely job. There were maybe 40 people around the world who truly understood what I was working on because it was a very deep, narrow groove. Um, and I missed, meeting people and interacting and hearing their different stories. So I always wanted to go into business for that reason and just use my physics, background as a way to look at business, as a different way to look at business that most people have. Um, and I started a company. I sold it probably too early. I was young again, and then I worked at Apple. And at Apple, we did really, really great jobs. I mean, it was very difficult because Apple was in trouble at the time, but I learned a lot. And then after Apple, I became a venture capitalist, so kind of went on the dark side and really on the other side of the table and said, okay, now I'm going to write checks and try to help entrepreneurs. And that gave me a very different perspective.
Mm,
Um, it also helped me understood that I wasn't in charge anymore. I wasn't the CEO anymore. And my job at best was to be a good diplomat to try to make the CEO um, take my ideas and believe that it was their own ideas and implement them. So very, very different skill set for sure. And then a lot more diplomatic role at interacting with other board members and other investors who have different views of the companies and different agendas depending on where they are in their life cycles in their funds. I thought that was really interesting. But the thing that I didn't really work well for me is that my influence as a board member wasn't as deep as I wanted it to be. And on the other hand, I didn't want to go to the extreme, which is being a CEO again. And so when I founded BlueDots 10 years ago, I found a really good balance, which is we're in the business of giving advice to CEOs and helping them grow. And we do that through a data-driven approach. So it's not like, what we think or, guessing. Um, and whether they implement the advice or not, it's really up to them. And it's really equivalent to being a doctor, where we have an X-ray machine and an MRI machine and a blood work machine. We can diagnose exactly what the issues are, and then we give them the prescription, and then they decide to go and buy the meds and take them, or they decide not to do it, and that's perfectly fine with us. So that's kind of the difference between my life before and my life after working with Steve Jobs.
wow, that is fascinating. Oh man, oh, what money I would have paid at that time, right? If I knew, like, oh, what Steve Jobs could teach people. So, what would you say, in that case? What is one lesson that you learned from Steve Jobs, um, post and pre and post, that you carry to this day that has made the most impact in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are three big lessons I learned from Steve. One is that don't be focused, but be hyper focused. I mean, Steve
Wow.
was the most focused business person I have ever met. And one day I was asking him, I said, Steve, why aren't you, on 60 Minutes and talking to, all those magazines and all that? And he looked at me like I was stupid and said, and basically he said, do you think those guys can help me design the next best product on the planet? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. And so, well, that's why I don't waste my time with them. So very, very focused. That's the first lesson. The second one is that simplicity, which is the success of Apple, which is the core reason Apple is so successful, is really, really hard. It's very hard to take a complex system or complex user interface product and make it so intuitive and so trivial. And that process to shed the complexity, if you will, is a very tricky and difficult problem. That's probably the second lesson. And then the third one I learned was that there is one and only one business on this planet, that everybody is in the exact same business. There are no millions of businesses or hundreds of thousands of businesses. There's only one. And that unique business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight. We are all in the business of delighting our customer, and setting that expectation right and delivering on that expectation is really critical. You cannot have an impedance mismatch between the delight your customers expect and what they actually receive. And Apple is all about that. And I think, if you think of it these terms, under those terms, you realize that what you do is almost less important than setting up that delight level and then delivering on it.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. My gosh, there's being focused and hyper focused. Wow. That is I think a lot of times entrepreneurs leaders are guilty of saying yes to too many things and
Right.
not saying no enough.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's a very, very great lesson. The other thing, the simplicity part. Oh my gosh. You know how many times I've had debates and talks to people about iPhone versus Android, and there's only certain level I can go with people and figure it's not about what's better and what's not. To me, uh, and I think not a lot of people see it that way. I figured that Apple spends so much money and effort onto making someone's life simple using that phone.
Hmm.
They wanted to eliminate any other reason possible. Like I don't want to use five fingers. I only want to use one thumb.
Right.
Um,
No
and
friction.
yeah, exactly. And making the interface easier and simpler to understand. Even my grandma can do it. And
Hmm.
I think that was one of the very important goal on Apple. So they've done a very, very good job in their interfaces. I mean, Android can provide a lot of a lot of apps and other things, but I don't think Apple tops the simplicity. The other part, delight. Oh my gosh, there's a reason that McDonald's, the biggest fastest chain in world, the company in the world, has a mascot as a Joker or a McDonald. I think
Right.
that's yeah. So because they're selling happiness, they're not focused on burgers.
Right.
And Starbucks does that pretty well
Yeah.
through their way. Apple does that pretty well through their ways. So
Yeah.
those are very, very impactful lessons. I hope people see what you've shared with us today, Philippe. That was amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. And again, it's about the experience. It is not about the product. It's about
Exa-
making people feel a certain way. It's this emotional connection with the product, but it's not the product itself.
yeah, wow, that's awesome. I want to take a next step onto your part, your vision, and Blue Dots.
Mhm.
Where are you going with that company, with the book, and your vision? Where do you see it going the next few years, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, if you could forecast it?
Well, we've been blessed. We studied, John and I, my partner, studied BlueDots in 2014, 10 years ago, with a very simple vision: is we want to help entrepreneurs and CEOs to grow their business,
Mhm.
because I don't know any other definition of success than growth. And I always tell our CEOs, the CEOs we work with, our job is to make you shine. And what we mean by that is, if you go to your boards or investors or family and you show consistent growth, then you will be defined as a great CEO. And the problem is, growth is really hard. It's like being a good parent. It's really, really hard. There's no real books. And so we wanted to find a new way to look at that problem. And that's how we invented those four axes of alignment and the methodology that we use and the data driven approach, which has been very, very successful. And not because we're smart, but because it's common sense. And our vision is to continue to deliver, really high value growth to entrepreneurs and CEOs and business leaders, and continue to build amazing companies and help them do that.
That's awesome. How Do you have a retirement age for yourself, or just like you work until the day you die? Is that kind of
I
work?
don't know how to spell retirement, and everybody I know who took retirement regretted it.
So you,
So I was talking to Mark Orlandi. He actually turned 80 years old last year, and he was telling he was the CEO of Apple during Gil Amelio, before Steve, and he was telling me. And Marco is an amazing person. He's Italian. He has a lot of energy, and he was telling me. He said, I retired for about 10 days. I played golf every day, and then I got bored. Um, so, I mean, I don't think of what we do at Blue Dots as work. We're here to help people, and it's very gratifying to actually see those companies grow and be successful. Um, and we just love what we do. So I never think about that word retirement. I don't have any notion of what it means. I have no concept about it. We just love what we're doing, and we're just gonna continue to do it as long as we can.
that's awesome. I want to take a page from your book, and this case, literally take a page from your book. Uh, I I was going through this. Um, so the 5 stages of company growth through revenue that you came up with. This is very interesting to me. I've never seen something like this before. I've seen forecasted about this before.
Mhm.
Um, where did you where did you come like how where did you come from this? Like how did you got this information together? Like what was the basis behind it? And I'd love to dive deep into these stages.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think that I've been on 23 boards, and I always think of companies like children. And I'm blessed. I have 2 kids, and what I observed is that every company literally is like a child. They are different. They have different characters. They have different DNA. They are going after different markets. They have different products, different business models, and so on and so forth. And that's why the challenge of growth is so difficult. It's just exactly the same as the challenge of parenting. So what worked for our son didn't necessarily work for our daughter, even though it's the same family, same concept, same principles. Um, and when I go from one board meeting and another, I used to say, well, we did this on that company. I just had a board meeting last week and it worked really well. And it's like, for some reason, it's a total failure on that company. So I always thought of companies and startup as kids, children. You love them, you want them to be successful. You'll do everything I can as a board member to make them successful. Um, and then I was realizing that it's like, well, how old is a company? And I found this rule of 3x. You multiply by 3 the age of the company, and then you have the equivalent age of the human being. So if you go public, typically you would go public after 6, 7, 8 years. Well, you multiply by 3 is 21 years old, which is the age you can legally drink in this country. And going public is like, you're now an adult. You're naked out there and you can screw up because everybody's watching you. So it worked out really well. And then I meet with an entrepreneur and I said, well, when did you start a company? Well, 3 years ago. I said, okay, well, you're a 9-year-old kid. And they're always surprised. And I said, you're running the marathon and you've done 5 miles, which is great, but you still have a long way to go. So I think the rule of 3 is actually pretty interesting and works in general, pretty well.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a Vision Pro yourself.